Meanwhile, presumptive Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump called for surveillance of mosques as part of U.S. law enforcement efforts to prevent terrorism and stood by his remarks on banning Muslim immigrants that others in his party have criticized. Trump repeated his call for a temporary ban on Muslim immigration to the United States.
We have to maybe check respectfully the mosques, and we have to check other places, because this is a problem that if we don't solve it, it's going to eat our country alive.
The Orlando gunman Omar Mateen is believed by authorities to have acted alone, inspired by radical ideology he was exposed to over the internet. Trump also says the Orlando shooting would have been different if patrons were armed.
If some of those great people that were in that club that night had guns strapped to their waist or strapped to their ankle, and if the bullets were going in the other direction aimed at this guy who was just open target practice, you would have had a situation, folks, which would have been always horrible, but nothing like the carnage that we all as a people suffered this weekend. Nothing. Okay, I'm going to say...
Trump spent the first days following the Orlando nightclub massacre hinting Obama was sympathizing with or even supporting terrorists.
We're trying to be nice. We have a president who wants to be so politically correct that he doesn't want to use the term radical Islamic terrorism. Doesn't want to use it. He gives a speech yesterday, a long speech that at the end of it, nobody knew what he was talking about. Nobody knew. He's trying to justify why he won't use, and he said radical Islam, because he didn't want to use the word terrorism, if you notice. Why he won't use that term, or why he doesn't use it, and how it doesn't make any difference, but it does make a difference.
President Obama and Hillary Clinton said on Wednesday that Trump's rhetoric had grown even more inflammatory in recent days.
It is apparent that Donald Trump does not seem to grasp any of this. He has been fixated on the phrase, and I quote, radical Islam, as if those are magic words that once uttered will stop terrorists from coming after us. And he wants to ban all Muslims from entering our country and suspend immigration from large parts of the world. His comments have become even more inflammatory in recent days. This approach isn't just wrong. It is dangerous, and I want to emphasize and underline this. The terrorist in Orlando was not born in Afghanistan, as Trump claims. He was born in Queens, New York, only miles away from where Donald Trump himself was born. A ban on Muslims would not have stopped this attack. Neither would a wall. I don't know how one builds a wall to keep the internet out. So not one of Donald Trump's reckless ideas would have saved a single life in Orlando. It's just more evidence that he is temperamentally unfit and totally unqualified to be commander-in-chief.
We now have proposals from the presumptive Republican nominee for President of the United States to bar all Muslims from emigrating to America. We hear language that singles out immigrants and suggests entire religious communities are complicit in violence. Where does this stop? The Orlando killer, one of the San Bernardino killers, the Fort Hood killer, they were all U.S. citizens. Are we going to start treating all Muslim Americans differently? We've heard these suggestions during the course of this campaign. Do Republican officials actually agree with this?
Paul Ryan, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, denounced Mr. Trump for trying to rally support for his anti-Muslim policies.
And so I do not think it is reflective of our principles, not just as a party, but as a country. And I think the smarter way to go in all respects is to have a security test and not a religious test. So we believe that we should have a robust security test to make sure that law enforcement gets the tools they need so that we actually do control who comes and goes in this country. As far as the Muslim community you mentioned, I think there's a really important distinction that every American needs to keep in mind. This is a war with radical Islam. It's not a war with Islam. Muslims are our partners.
The attack on the Pulse nightclub in the central Florida city was the deadliest mass shooting in modern U.S. history and the worst attack on the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender community. Now, new polls indicate that the candidate's recent antics may have started to harm his popularity with voters. After months of breaking even with Hillary Clinton, his presumptive Democratic rival, Mr. Trump, has dropped some 12 points behind her in recent polls.